That hot, sick, twisting feeling you get when someone you love looks at someone else a beat too long. You didn't invent that. You didn't learn it. It was installed in you long before you were born, by hundreds of thousands of years of ancestors for whom that exact feeling was a matter of survival. Jealousy feels intensely, unbearably personal, and it is one of the oldest, most impersonal machines running inside you. I want to be careful and honest with this one because it is a heavy subject and it is one that touches almost everyone at some point. We're not here to excuse anything, and we're definitely not here to celebrate this feeling. We're here to understand it, to ask a genuinely fascinating question. Where did this come from? When did a human first feel that specific green gnawing ache? And why has it shadowed our species and our love for so unimaginably long? Because here is the thing nobody tells you about jealousy. It is not a flaw in you. It is not a modern hang-up invented by love songs and dating apps and too much time online. It is not at its root a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a piece of ancient survival equipment, as old as human bonding itself and quite possibly older than our species entirely. And by the end of this video, I think you'll see that awful feeling in a completely different light, not as a weakness to be ashamed of, but as one of the oldest, strangest inheritances we carry. So let's start with the only question that matters when you're trying to understand an emotion. What is it for? Because emotions are not random. This is the key that unlocks everything. Every deep, universal human emotion is there because somewhere back down the long chain of our ancestors, it helps someone survive and reproduce. Fear keeps you away from what can kill you. Disgust keeps you away from what can poison you. Love bonds you to the people you need and who need you. These feelings are tools hammered out over millions of years, and they are still swinging inside you today. So when we find a feeling as powerful, as universal, and as agonizing as sexual jealousy, we have to assume it was doing a job. A serious one. And here is a useful test for how deep an emotion runs. Ask whether you can choose not to feel it. You can't choose to stop being afraid of a sudden movement in the dark. You can't choose to find rotting meat delicious. Those reactions fire before your conscious mind even gets a vote, which is a dead giveaway that they're old, deep, hardwired systems, not opinions you picked up along the way, and jealousy is exactly the same. Nobody decides to feel jealous. It ambushes you, it floods in unwanted, often deeply embarrassing, frequently against your own stated values and better judgment. You can be a thoroughly modern, enlightened person who intellectually rejects the whole idea of possessiveness and still feel that ugly heat rise in your chest completely without permission. That involuntary, ambushing quality is the fingerprint of something ancient. It is not coming from your beliefs. It is coming from your wiring. And wiring that deep was laid down a very, very long time ago. And the job it was doing is called mate guarding. Here is the brutal logic, and I'll be plain about it because the plainness is the point. For our ancestors, the entire game of evolution came down to one thing: reproduction. Passing on your line and a committed partner, a mate, represented an enormous investment in that goal. Time, resources, protection, cooperation. The shared staggering work of keeping fragile children alive in a lethal world. In that context, a threat to that bond, a rival moving in, a partner's attention drifting elsewhere, was not a minor social awkwardness. It was a genuine threat to everything you had invested your survival in. And the ancestors who felt nothing in the face of that threat, who watched a rival move in on their mate and simply shrugged, they were, on average, outcompeted. Their bonds dissolved. Their investment walked away. Their line was more likely to end. But the ancestors who felt something, a sharp, intolerable alarm that screamed, "Pay attention, this bond is under threat," those ancestors were more likely to guard the bond, hold the partnership together, and successfully raise their children. And so that feeling, that painful, motivating alarm, got passed down generation after generation. For a length of time your mind cannot really hold. You are the descendant of the ones who felt it. The ones who didn't feel it left fewer descendants to inherit their calm. That is the uncomfortable truth at the center of this. Jealousy hurts so much precisely because it was designed to an alarm that is easy to ignore, is a useless alarm. Evolution made this one agonizing on purpose, because the stakes it was guarding were, in the cold arithmetic of survival, absolutely enormous. The pain is the point. The pain is what made your ancestors act. And I want to underline just how high those stakes really were, because from where we sit, comfortable and safe, it is easy to forget, for an ancestral human, a pair bond wasn't a nice addition to an otherwise stable life. It was often the difference between your children living and dying. Raising a human child is absurdly demanding. Human babies are helpless for years, longer than almost any other animal, and in the ancient world, keeping one alive to adulthood was a monumental task that a single person could rarely manage alone. Two committed partners, pooling food, protection, and care, gave a child a fighting chance. A bond that dissolved, a partner who left, a rival who broke the partnership apart, could quite literally be a death sentence for the children who depended on it. So when that ancient alarm screamed at the first hint of a threat to the bond, it was not overreacting. It was guarding something on which actual small lives depended. That is why evolution made it so loud, so impossible to ignore. It was protecting the most precious and fragile thing our ancestors had, the next generation itself. Now let's talk about the deep, uncomfortable asymmetry inside all of this, because it explains a lot and it connects to something we've explored before on this channel. Evolutionary psychologists, going back to the foundational work of researchers like Robert Trivers on parental investment, have long pointed out that the threat of infidelity may have carried different flavors of danger for ancestral males and females. For a female, a partner whose attention and resources wandered to a rival risked losing the protection and provision she and her children depended on. That is a catastrophic threat for a male. There was an additional peculiar problem, the one we touched on in another video, the ancient uncertainty of fatherhood. A male who unknowingly raised a rival's child had, in evolutionary terms, invested everything in a line that wasn't his. Now, I want to be careful here because the research on the exact differences in how jealousy is experienced is genuinely debated, and it is easy to overstate. But the core point stands, and it is profound. For both sexes, in different but overlapping ways, a threat to the pair bond was a threat to survival and reproduction itself. And so evolution built into both a powerful alarm system tuned to detect and respond to exactly that threat. That alarm is jealousy. It isn't a bug in the human heart. It is a feature, and a very old one. So how old? This is where it gets genuinely startling. Let me throw something at you that might sound wild. Sexual jealousy is almost certainly older than our species, older than Homo sapiens. Possibly older than humanity in any form at all, because mate guarding, the behavior underneath the feeling, isn't unique to us. We see it all over the animal kingdom. We see males and females of countless species guarding their mates, driving off rivals, staying close to a partner during critical times, reacting with what certainly looks like aggression and distress to a threat to their bond. The behavior is everywhere that pair bonds and mate investment exist. And here is the crucial link. Wherever you find animals that form bonds and invest heavily in mating and offspring, you tend to find some version of mate guarding protecting that investment. Our own primate relatives show clear mate guarding behaviors, which means the roots of that jealous impulse very likely stretch back past the origin of humanity, into our pre-human ancestors, into the deep evolutionary past. When the first recognizable human felt that first pang of jealousy, they were not inventing something new. They were inheriting something ancient, a feeling refined by evolution long before anyone was human enough to give it a name. We didn't create jealousy. We were born into it, a feeling already waiting for us, older than our own species. And when we look across humanity itself, the picture only gets stronger, because jealousy turns out to be everywhere. Anthropologists who study human societies across the entire planet find sexual jealousy in essentially all of them. It shows up in cultures on every continent, in tiny foraging bands and sprawling cities, in societies with radically different rules about marriage, sex, and family. The specific triggers vary. The customs built around it vary enormously. What counts as a betrayal in one culture may be perfectly acceptable in another, but the underlying capacity for the feeling is always there, and that near universality is a massive clue. When a trait shows up in virtually every human culture on Earth, regardless of history or environment or belief, that is a strong sign you're not looking at something learned or invented. You're looking at something that comes standard with the human mind, something built in, a shared inheritance rather than a local invention. Jealousy passes that test about as clearly as any human emotion can, and this points at something profound about the emotion itself, something I really want you to sit with. Because it means jealousy is not the opposite of love, it is the shadow of love. They are two sides of the very same thing. Think about it. Jealousy only exists where there is a bond worth protecting. You do not feel it about a stranger. You feel it in exact proportion to how much you have invested, how much you care, how much you have to lose. The same evolutionary process that built our extraordinary capacity for pair bonding, for deep, lasting, cooperative love, the thing that makes humans humans, necessarily built its guardian at the same time. The bond and the guarding of the bond evolved together, because a bond with no defense is a bond that gets lost. You cannot have the one without the other. The capacity for deep love and the capacity for deep jealousy came into the world holding hands. They are, in a strange and uncomfortable way, the same ancient adaptation, seen from two different angles, the light and the shadow of the same fire. And I think this reframes the whole thing. If you let it, we tend to imagine a perfect love as one with no jealousy in it at all. A pure, serene, utterly secure affection. But that may be a fantasy that misunderstands what love actually is. The very depth that makes love precious, the investment, the vulnerability, the staking of your happiness on another person, is the exact same depth that gives jealousy something to grab. A love that could never, under any circumstances, produce a flicker of jealousy might not be a higher love at all. It might just be a shallower one. Something you don't care about enough to fear losing. That is the strange, almost unbearable irony buried in this ancient machinery. The feeling we're most ashamed of is generated by the very thing we're most proud of. The capacity to hurt this way and the capacity to love that way are not two separate things. They're one thing, wearing two faces, which means you can't simply amputate the jealousy without cutting into the love it grew from. That is why it feels so overwhelming. That is why it can hijack an otherwise reasonable person so completely. You are not feeling a petty modern insecurity. You are feeling the ancient protective fury of a bond-guarding instinct that predates your species, firing off inside a modern skull that mostly no longer needs it. And that gap between the ancient instinct and the modern world is exactly where we have to turn to the hard part. Because this is where the story stops being merely fascinating and becomes genuinely serious. Here is the uncomfortable and frankly dangerous part. An instinct that was forged in a brutal ancestral world does not always translate well or safely into ours. The same alarm that once motivated an ancestor to hold a partnership together has also across human history been twisted into some of the ugliest things people do to each other. Possessiveness, control, the treatment of a partner as property to be owned rather than a person to be loved. And at its very worst, jealousy has been used as a justification for cruelty, for domination, and for violence. I want to be very clear about something, because it is the most important thing in this whole video. Understanding where a feeling comes from is not the same as excusing what people do with it. This is the crucial line, and it never blurs. The feeling of jealousy is ancient, universal, and human, and there is no shame in feeling it. But feeling it does not license a single harmful action. An instinct is an explanation. It is never an excuse. Our ancestors also inherited instincts toward rage, toward violence, toward all sorts of impulses that a decent human being learns to feel and then master. The whole story of becoming civilized, of becoming a good person, is the story of learning to hold an ancient feeling in one hand and choose not to act destructively on it with the other. Jealousy is something you may feel. What you do next is entirely, completely yours. And this is genuinely one of the places where being modern is a gift, not a burden. Because you are so much more than your instincts. You have the one thing your ancient wiring never counted on, the ability to notice the feeling, name it, understand where it came from, and then decide consciously that you will not be dragged around by it. An animal cannot do that. An animal simply is its instincts, but a human can feel the ancient alarm blaring and still choose deliberately to trust their partner, to talk instead of accuse, to sit with the discomfort rather than inflict it on someone else. That gap between feeling and action is where your whole humanity lives. The instinct is the inheritance. What you choose to do with it is you, and history is heavy with the consequences of people who did not master it. While whole systems of control, particularly the control of women, have been built partly on the foundation of this jealous instinct, dressed up in law and custom and tradition. The instinct is old and in its origin was simply trying to protect a bond. What humans have built on top of it, structures of ownership, suspicion, and control, is a different matter entirely, and a great deal of human suffering lives in that gap. If any of this touches your life, if jealousy, your own or someone else's, has become something frightening or controlling or unsafe, please treat that seriously. That is not a feeling to simply understand and move past. That is a situation where reaching out for real support and help is one of the wisest and most human things a person can do. I'll leave that there, and I mean it. So when did humans first feel sexual jealousy? And here is the honest answer, the one this channel always owes you. We can never pinpoint the first jealous heart. Emotions don't fossilize. There is no artifact of the first pang, no bone, that records the first sleepless, suspicious night beside an ancient fire. We can't dig up a feeling. Anyone who claims to know the exact moment is telling you a story. But here is what the evidence, taken altogether, strongly suggests, and it is remarkable. The answer to when did humans first feel it may be that humans always felt it, that there was never a jealousy-free chapter of our species to begin with. Because the feeling appears to be older than we are, we see its behavioral roots across the animal kingdom, in our primate relatives, in the deep logic of pair bonding and parental investment that governs so much of life. It seems overwhelmingly likely that the very first beings we would recognize as human already carried this feeling with them, fully formed, inherited from ancestors who felt a version of it long before they were human at all. Jealousy didn't begin with humanity. Humanity began already holding it, because that is the part I want to leave you with. The next time that hot, sick feeling rises up in you, and it will because you are human, I want you to recognize it for what it actually is. It is not a small thing, or a shameful thing, or a sign that you are broken. It is 100,000 years old, at the very least, and probably far older. It is the ancient guardian of the human bond, still standing watch inside you, still trying to protect something it thinks is precious, using the only crude tool it has ever had, which is pain. It is love's oldest shadow. It is the price of being a creature capable of bonding this deeply at all. You don't have to obey it, you don't have to be ruled by it, and you absolutely must not let it rule what you do to others, but you can at least understand it. You can recognize the ancient machinery for what it is, feel it rise, and know that it is not the whole of you. It is just a very old part of you, doing the only job it was ever built to do, in a world it no longer quite fits. And there is a strange kind of peace in that, in knowing that the feeling you're most ashamed of is not a personal failing at all. It is simply the shadow cast by your capacity to love. They didn't invent jealousy. Neither did you. It was handed to all of us, fully formed by ancestors older than our species, along with the very capacity for love that makes it hurt so much in the first place. So here is my question for you. Now that you can see jealousy as the shadow of love rather than a flaw in your character, does it change how you'd want to handle it the next time it rises? I'm genuinely curious how that lands for you. Until then, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.